track. The next really important tool, I would say after a profiler, this is definitely the number 2 tool that I tend to use, is the Windows Performance Monitor. This lets you get graphical information on system counters. You can get real-time data or also data from log files. In Vista, it looks again a little different. There's a thing called Resource Overview that gives you real-time data on CPU, disk, and network. The charts can be either line, histogram, or report format. You can add multiple physical counters to gather tons of information, and some of these are specific to SQL Server. We will take a look at a handful of important counters next. One thing you will notice about the performance counter is that there are a lot of them, so trying to figure out which you want to use can be a little confusing, and also uh, it depends on what you're trying to get. But here's a few that I think are important as they relate to SQL Server. The first one is the CPU, which is the processor, which is the percent processor time. Same thing we saw in the task manager. It essentially tells you the percent of CPU being utilized, and it should be really less than 50%. If your database server is mostly around 90-100%, then you have a bottleneck in that area. The next category is memory. And the two that I like there are available MB, which this is the amount of megabytes, the memory available for new processors. So the more the memory, the better. The next one is pages per second. This tells you how many times the virtual memory is being accessed, and this should, I believe, be lower than 20. As far as the disk category, you can look at percent disk time, which is similar to processor time, and greater than 90% is bad. Um, and another important one is the average disk queue length. This shows the number of I/O operations that are waiting for the disk, and greater than 2 is bad for that. Finally, we have some SQL Server counters, and I just listed 3 here. One is the full scans per second, and any value like 1 or 2 is bad. This shows you if you're not using indexes and you're using a table scan. The next one is the buffer cache hit ratio, and this should be above 90%, and it shows you that you are indeed using buffer cache. And finally, we have the counter relating to locks, which is the average wait time, and this should also be low. So let's switch to performance monitor. I do have this running down here because I actually went ahead and set some of the values. So the first thing is the reliability and performance. As far as launching it, I can show you quickly how to get there. You do start control panel in Vista, and then here's what you would click to get to the performance monitor. It says performance information. So jumping back to the view in the reliability and performance, you'll notice that we have nice visual on the top, and then we have tabs down here. So you can see my CPU is pretty active. If I wanted to get more information, I could click here, and it'll tell you, okay, which which areas are taking a lot of the CPU. Some of these are Windows processes that are running. I've got my Camtasia, that's the one I'm using for recording, so that gives you the CPU. The next one is the disk information, and it looks like I'm using about anywhere from 50 kilobytes per second to look like 400. And again, it's telling you the number of reads, bytes per minute, write, bytes per minute, response time, which file is using that process. So a lot of information right off the bat. Similarly, you have the network and memory and some of the other tabs. I'm going to actually go ahead and select the performance monitor tab here, and this is really important as it relates to SQL Server. Now what we have here is a graphical view of some of these monitors that I already selected. So down here you'll notice I have the percent processor time, which is it gives you the color, so that's the red. Then I have the amount of available bytes, which is actually hard to see. It's up here, but if you can't find it on the graph, you can click on this little pencil and it'll tell you where that is. So it looks like it's way on the top, which means that we have a lot of available bytes, which is a good thing. In the middle here, it'll tell you what was the last value, what's the average, minimum, maximum. So that kind of gives you distinct values. Then I'm also looking at the buffer hit cache ratio, which seems to be up on the top too, and looks like it's about 100%, so that's great. Full scans, right now the value is pretty low. I'm going to actually go ahead and run some queries next, which will move this value. So the average right now is 0.18, which is great because it should be less than 2. And then finally, I'm looking at page reads per second, and as you can tell, there's not a whole lot going on also. As far as adding a counter, you can click on plus, and maybe we can add one more here. And you'll notice that there are a lot of counters here, uh, and you'll notice all of a sudden I'm seeing MS SQL named instance. I actually have another instance running on this machine, so that was relating to that. And then down here we see SQL Server. So let's go ahead and actually maybe we can select this counter, SQL Server databases, okay? And then I'm really interested in adventure work, so I will select that and then click add. That didn't add anything, so let me try that one again. SQL Server databases. Or let's just do this total one. That doesn't seem to be working, so I'm going to actually pick something else. Let's pick SQL Server transactions or errors. Maybe user errors. Somehow it's not letting me add. I will have to take a look at that later. I'm not sure why it's not letting me add, but we will just let's just work with the ones we have already. And then what I'm going to do next is actually going to switch to Management Studio, which is if you don't know how to get there, you go to Start, All Programs, SQL Server 2008, and then Management Studio. So I already have this running. The first thing I'm going to do is I've created a table called sales.customer underscore all table, and this is essentially a copy of the sales.customer table from AdventureWorks. I have created a number of records in there, so I'm going to just go ahead and do a regular select count. And while that is running, I will switch to the performance monitor. So notice now this sort of like was our baseline. Okay, so our CPU was around 40%, and the page reads were down really low. And all of a sudden, notice that this value is moving up as I started to run that. And then I will go ahead and actually switch to another query. In this query, what I'm doing is I've set up a, let's go to the top. It says using a while loop to select data from sales.customer underscore all with a 1-second delay. And so this is a very read intensive operation. I'm using essentially a loop, and here is my main query. I'm just saying select star from the table where modified date is in this range and customer ID is less than 7100. So, and as far as looping, I will loop this 20 times. Okay, and in between my runs, I'm going to go ahead and wait for 1 second. So let's go ahead and parse this query, and then I will go ahead and run this. And then let's switch to performance monitor and now see what happens. Notice that your number of reads initially when we were looking at these, I think this was right around 0. Now the average is 37 per second. So definitely we're getting a little more activity. Looks like the buffer cache hit ratio is still pretty good. Processor time has moved up a little bit. It's right around, average used to be around 50, now it's about 80, and looks like the look at the average number, it's starting to go up also. Now while this is running, I'm actually going to give it a little bit more, and I will here we essentially have similar concept. I'm using a while loop to insert data from sales.customer to sales.customer all, and then I'm doing an update, and for this one I'm actually waiting 3 seconds in between. So the query looks similar to the other one. This time I'm just doing an update to the table, and the table has close to, I think, 3 million rows now, so it's a good size table. And I will go ahead and run this one. This is still running, so now we should definitely be seeing more activity, and we do. I mean, our processor last time I looked was at 50%, and now it looks like it's at 75%. Number of bytes available is still pretty good. Buffer cache is okay. Full scans seems to be coming up a little bit. This query stopped, so I'm going to go, it said query executed successfully, so I'm going to go ahead and run this again.